Vanessa's spit landed right on my plate of homemade chicken stew with a wet sound that still haunts me at night. Her words stabbed my heart like poisoned daggers. "Eat it, you useless old woman. You're going to a nursing home soon. You won't even get this there." But what came after that hellish moment is going to haunt her in nightmares for a long time, because that woman had no idea who she was messing with. It was Sunday, the day I considered sacred for gathering the family around the table. I had been preparing that lunch since 6 in the morning with all the love of my 67 years. The aroma of simmering spices filled the house. The golden potatoes rested on the porcelain serving dish I inherited from my mother, and I had set the table with the pink tablecloth I embroidered when I still believed my effort would be valued. Leo, my 8-year-old grandson, froze with his fork in midair, his huge eyes darting between his mother and me as if witnessing the apocalypse. Isaiah, my only son, the same one I carried for 9 months and raised alone after his father abandoned us, looked down at his plate and kept chewing as if nothing had happened, as if his own mother didn't deserve a single word of defense. Vanessa sat up straight in her chair with that cruel smile she had perfected over the 5 years she had been living in my house. Yes, my house, because even though she paraded around like the queen of the place, this property was still mine. My violet dress, the one I had put on especially for the occasion, now felt like a ridiculous costume. I had done my hair, put a little rouge on my cheeks, chosen my small pearl earrings, all to feel dignified at my own table. "Didn't you hear what I said, Margaret?" Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a saw. "Eat that crap. After all, that's what they'll give you at the nursing home that's waiting for you." Her laugh sounded like breaking glass, and I felt something break inside my chest too. I looked at the plate in front of me. The chicken I had seasoned so carefully, the potatoes I had peeled one by one, thinking of Leo's taste, the tomato salad I had cut into perfect slices. All of it was contaminated by the contempt of this woman who had come into my home and turned it into a silent hell. For these 5 years, I had put up with her poisonous comments, her scornful looks, the way she treated me like a maid in my own house. I had endured her ordering me to clean the bathroom when she had guests, forbidding me from using the living room phone, making me feel like an intruder in the place where I had raised my son. But that spit was the last straw. As I watched Vanessa's saliva slide down my food, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't just the humiliation of the moment. It was the accumulation of 1,000 little cruelties, 1,000 silent slights, 1,000 times my son had chosen to stay silent rather than defend me. Tears started to burn my eyes. But I swallowed them just as I had learned to swallow everything in this house. Vanessa kept talking, her voice growing sharper and crueler with each word. "Look how pathetically you're looking at us, as if we're the ones to blame for you being a burden. Leo, tell your grandmother it's time she understood her place here." My grandson, that little angel with big eyes who used to hug me and ask for stories before bed, lowered his head and muttered something inaudible. Vanessa had managed to make even him fear me, to see me as something to be ashamed of, instead of the grandmother who adored him. Isaiah finally looked up from his plate, but not to defend me. "Mom, maybe Vanessa's right. Maybe it would be better if—" His voice trailed off, but I understood perfectly what he meant. My own son, the person I had sacrificed my entire youth for, was considering sending me to a nursing home to please his wife. The clock on the wall read 2:30 in the afternoon when I made the decision that would change everything forever. I stood up from my chair with a calmness I didn't understand myself. My legs were shaking, but something inside me had hardened like steel. I took the contaminated plate with steady hands and without a word walked to the kitchen. Vanessa watched me, expecting to see me broken, humiliated, defeated as always. But this time was different. This time, instead of washing her plate as I had done 1,000 times before, I lifted it over my head and smashed it against the kitchen floor with all the strength my 67-year-old arms had. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the house like a war cry. "What the hell are you doing, you crazy old woman?" Vanessa appeared at the kitchen doorway, her eyes wide, as if she had just seen a ghost rise from its grave. Isaiah was behind her, with that panicked look he got when things spun out of his control. I just stood there, surrounded by broken pieces of the dish, breathing as if I had run a marathon. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in 5 years, it wasn't from fear. It was from a rage so pure it gave me strength I didn't know I had. "What I should have done a long time ago," I answered in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. It was deeper, firmer, loaded with an authority I had forgotten I possessed. "Breaking everything you contaminate with your presence in my house." Vanessa took a step closer, her face red with fury. "You're completely insane, Isaiah. Look what your mother did. She's losing her mind." She pointed at the broken pieces as if they were evidence of my madness, but I saw something completely different. I saw the fragments of my dignity that I had finally decided to defend. My son approached with his hands outstretched, as if I were a wild animal that might attack at any moment. "Mom, please calm down. Let's talk. Let's solve this like civilized people." His voice trembled, and for a moment I saw in him the scared little boy who used to hide behind my skirts during a storm. But it was too late for soft words, too late for arrangements and empty apologies. "Civilized." I laughed, and my laugh sounded as bitter as cold coffee. "You talked to me about being civilized after your wife spat on my food as if I were a dog, after 5 years of treating me like a servant in the house that my sweat and tears paid for." Leo appeared timidly in the doorway, his eyes full of tears. My heart broke seeing him like that, but I knew this had to happen. He had to see his grandmother stand up for herself, even if it was for the last time. "Grandma Margaret, are you okay?" His little broken voice almost made me falter, almost made me go back to being the submissive old woman who cleaned in silence and endured everything with a forced smile. But no, not this time. I knelt down and caressed his cheek with infinite tenderness. "I'm fine, my love. For the first time in a long time, I'm perfectly fine." I gave him a kiss on the forehead and stood up to face the adults who had turned my home into a battlefield. Vanessa had regained her composure and was now looking at me with that venomous smile I knew so well. "Perfect. Now everyone can see what you really are, a hysterical and violent old woman." "Isaiah, I hope you now understand why we can't keep living with her. She's dangerous." The words hit me like slaps, but this time they didn't bend me. This time they made me stand taller. "Dangerous." I repeated the word, savoring it. "You're right, Vanessa. I am very dangerous. Dangerous to your plan of turning my son into your puppet. Dangerous to your comfort of living for free in a house that doesn't belong to you. Dangerous to your fantasy of being the queen of a castle you didn't build." And Isaiah stepped between us, but his gesture was 5 years too late. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is. Vanessa is my wife. She's Leo's mother. We have to find a solution that works for everyone. A solution that works for everyone." My voice went up an octave. "You mean a solution like sending me to a nursing home so your little wife can redecorate my house to her liking, that kind of solution?" The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Vanessa and Isaiah exchanged a look that said it all. They had already talked about this. They had already planned my fate, as if I were an old piece of furniture to be disposed of. At that moment, I understood that the humiliation at lunch hadn't been a spontaneous outburst. It had been calculated, designed to provoke exactly this reaction. They wanted me to lose my temper, to seem unstable, to give them an excuse to do what they had already decided to do. But two could play that game. I headed to my room with firm steps, stepping on some pieces of porcelain that crunched under my shoes like broken bones. I heard them whispering behind me, probably planning their next move, probably calling someplace to confirm my reservation in the hell they had prepared for me. I opened my bedroom closet and took out the suitcase I hadn't used since my husband died 15 years ago. It was brown leather with worn corners and an old airport tag still stuck to one side. I placed it on the bed and started packing my clothes, my few books, the photos of Leo when he was a baby. I could hear them arguing in the living room, their voices rising and falling like angry waves. Vanessa was clearly upset that things hadn't gone as she expected, and Isaiah sounded like a man trying to put out a fire with a glass of water. As I folded my violet dress, the one I had put on with such hope that morning, a tear fell onto the fabric. But it wasn't a tear of defeat. It was a tear of liberation, like the ones you shed when a very sad movie finally ends, and you can walk out of the theater into the daylight. I finished packing in 15 minutes. 15 minutes to sum up 67 years of life in a brown suitcase that had seen better days. As I zipped it up, I could hear the argument in the living room had intensified. Vanessa was screaming something about senile dementia and legal responsibilities, while Isaiah was repeating like a broken record that everything could be fixed if I apologized and promised to behave. Behave. As if I were a naughty child instead of the woman who had given birth to, raised, and supported the man who was now asking me to behave. I took the suitcase and left my room. The hallway had never seemed so long. Every step on the burgundy carpet I had chosen myself 20 years ago sounded like a drumbeat marking my farewell. When I reached the living room, the three of them stared at me as if a Martian had appeared in the middle of their family meeting. "Where do you think you're going?" Vanessa had crossed her arms, partially blocking the front door. Her posture screamed authority, as if this were her house and I were a problem tenant refusing to pay rent. "I'm leaving my own house before I get thrown out of my own house," I replied, my voice sounding calmer than I felt inside. "The difference is subtle but important." Isaiah approached with that expression he used when he wanted to convince me of something, the same face he had made at 12 when he broke my grandmother's crystal vase and tried to convince me it was the cat. "Mom, you don't have to leave. We can talk, we can work this out like adults." Vanessa didn't mean. "Didn't mean what?" I interrupted. "Didn't mean to call me a useless old woman. Didn't mean to spit in my food. Didn't mean to humiliate me in front of my grandson." My voice rose with each question, and I saw Leo shrink behind the armchair like a frightened little animal. I approached my grandson and knelt in front of him, ignoring how my knees protested the movement. I took his small hands in mine and looked him straight in the eye. "Leo, my love, I want you to know that your grandmother loves you more than anything in this world, and that nothing happening here is your fault." "It's okay," he nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Are you leaving forever, Grandma?" The question pierced me like a spear, but I kept my composure. "I don't know, sweetie, but I want you to remember that people who truly love us never spit on our food or call us ugly names. Do you understand?" Leo nodded again and hugged me with the desperate strength of a child who feels the world is crumbling around him. Vanessa cleared her throat loudly as if our tender moment was bothering her. "Enough with the drama," she said in the voice she used to address Leo when he had done something wrong. "Margaret, if you're really leaving, at least have the decency to leave the house keys." I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 67 years weighing on my bones. I looked her straight in the eye, those small, hard eyes that had never shown a shred of genuine affection for me. "The keys to my house stay with me," I said with a calm I didn't feel. "This property is in my name, paid for with the sweat of my brow and the overtime I worked at the factory for 20 years, while I raised that son of yours who now agrees with everything you say on my own." The silence that followed was so thick you could have swum in it. Vanessa opened her mouth like a fish out of water. She clearly hadn't expected that answer. Isaiah looked like someone had slapped him, and Leo looked at all of us with the innocent confusion of someone who doesn't understand why adults behave worse than children. "But Mom," Isaiah stammered, "we've been paying the bills, we've invested money in repairs." I laughed, and my laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Paying bills with what money, Isaiah? With the money you earned from that part-time job you got 6 months ago, or with the money your wife earned selling cosmetics to the neighbors?" Vanessa's face turned red as a tomato. She clearly didn't like her real income being mentioned, which didn't even reach $200 a month on her best days. "You've been living off my retirement pension." I continued, feeling how each word returned a little bit of my lost power. "My $450 a month pension that you've been spending as if it were yours, while I had to ask permission to buy a new shampoo." Isaiah ran his hands through his hair, that nervous gesture he'd had since childhood, when he knew he'd done something wrong, but didn't want to admit it. "Mom, you know the economy is tough. You know we're doing the best we can." "The best you can." My voice broke slightly, not from sadness, but from a rage so deep it surprised me. Does the best you can include letting me eat leftovers while you serve yourselves the large portions? Does it include making me sleep in the smallest room of my own house? Does it include allowing your wife to treat me like her personal maid?" Vanessa finally found her voice. "Don't exaggerate. We've always been fair to you. We give you a roof over your head food. You give me." I exploded like a pressure cooker that had been building up steam for years. "You give me a roof in my own house. You give me food, bought with my money. You who came here with 1 suitcase and 2 dresses, you give me anything." Leo started crying openly, and it broke my heart, but I couldn't stop now. The words poured out of me like lava from a volcano that had been dormant for too long. "For 5 years, I have been the servant in my own house. I've cleaned your messes. I've cooked your favorite meals. I've looked after Leo while you went out to have fun, and all in exchange for being treated like a nuisance, as if my existence were an inconvenience you have to tolerate." I headed for the front door, dragging my suitcase across the tiles I had scrubbed on my knees hundreds of times. Vanessa stepped aside, but her face showed a mixture of fury and something that looked surprisingly like fear. "And what are you going to do now?" she asked me, her voice trying to sound defiant but trembling at the edges. "Where are you going to go? You have no one else, Margaret. We are your only family." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. For a second, her words echoed in my mind like a terrible prophecy. It was true I didn't have many options, that my savings were practically non-existent, that most of my friends had died or were in nursing homes. But then I remembered the spit on my plate, and the strength returned to my legs. "I'd rather be alone than in bad company," I replied without turning around. "And you are not my family. A family doesn't spit on your food. A family doesn't humiliate you. A family doesn't plan to send you to a nursing home to take your things." I opened the door, and the fresh afternoon air hit my face like a blessing. For the first time in 5 years, I breathed without feeling like I was suffocating. The street had never seemed so wide or so quiet. It was 4 in the afternoon on a Sunday, and the neighborhood was resting in that heavy calm that comes after a family lunch. I dragged my suitcase along the concrete sidewalk, feeling how each spinning wheel took me further away from the nightmare my life had been for the last 5 years. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have enough money for a decent hotel. I didn't have family to welcome me with open arms. All I had was my newly recovered dignity and a suitcase full of memories that hurt less than staying. My legs started to shake after 3 blocks. The adrenaline that had sustained me during the confrontation was beginning to fade, and the reality of my situation fell on me like a cold rain. I sat on a park bench where I used to bring Leo when he was smaller, where he would run among the swings while I knitted and dreamed of being the favorite grandmother who was always available. I took my phone out of my purse, that old device Vanessa always criticized for wasting battery. The screen showed 3 missed calls from Isaiah, but I wasn't ready to hear his empty apologies or his promises that everything would change. Instead, I dialed the number I had saved under the name Lydia Work. Lydia had been my colleague at the textile factory for 15 years until we both retired. We had lost touch when I moved in with Isaiah, but I remembered she had always told me her door was open if I ever needed her. "Margaret," her voice sounded surprised but warm. "What a surprise to hear from you." "How are you, dear?" The words got stuck in my throat. How could I explain that I was sitting on a public park bench with a suitcase, homeless, familyless, with nothing but my wounded pride and a pension that was barely enough to survive? "Lydia," I finally managed to say, "do you remember you always told me that if I ever needed anything?" "Of course I remember. What do you need?" "Are you okay? You sound strange." I broke down. All the tears I had been holding back during the confrontation came out in a rush like a dam finally giving way to pressure. I told her everything between sobs. The spit, the daily humiliations, the conversation about the nursing home, my explosion in the kitchen, the suitcase now resting at my feet as evidence of my failure as a mother and grandmother. Lydia listened without interrupting, making those sounds of understanding that only women who have lived a lot know how to make. When I finished my story, there was a brief silence before her voice, now firm and decisive, filled the receiver. "Margaret, listen to me carefully. You take a cab right now and you come to my house." I have a spare room and a full teapot. We can talk about everything else tomorrow. Lydia, I can't pay you rent. My pension is barely enough for— Who asked you for rent? We're old friends, not a landlord and tenant. Besides, my house is too big for one person. You'd be doing me a favor by keeping me company. I hung up the phone with a mixture of relief and gratitude that made me cry again. But these tears were different. They were tears of hope, of knowing that there were still people in the world who understood what solidarity meant between women who had worked hard their whole lives. The taxi arrived in 15 minutes. The driver, an older man with a gray mustache, helped me with the suitcase without asking why a woman my age was traveling alone on a Sunday afternoon, looking like she'd been crying. During the ride to Lydia's house, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Isaiah, Isaiah, Isaiah. On the 5th call, I decided to answer. Mom, thank God. Where are you? Vanessa is very worried. She says maybe we were too hasty. That we can talk. Vanessa is worried. I laughed bitterly. The same Vanessa who spat on my food is worried about me. What an interesting change of heart. Mom, please come home. Leo won't stop crying. He's asking for you. We can fix this. We can set some rules so we're all comfortable. Rules. The taxi took a turn, and I held on to the seat. What kind of rules, Isaiah? Rules like, I can't use my own kitchen after 8 p.m., like I can't invite friends over without asking permission, like I have to be grateful for a plate of food in my own house. It's not like that, Mom. You know it's not like that. It's not like that. My voice rose. Isaiah, for 5 years, I have lived like a stranger in my own home. I have asked permission for everything. I have put up with slights. I have cleaned messes I didn't make. I have taken care of your son while you and your wife went out to have fun, and all in exchange for being treated like a burden. The silence on the other end of the phone was telling. Isaiah knew everything I was saying was true, but admitting it would mean admitting he had failed as a son, and that was something his ego was not willing to accept. Where are you? He finally asked. At least tell me where you are so I know you're safe. I'm safe, I replied, and for the first time in a long time, it was true. I'm better than safe. I'm free. I hung up the phone and put it on silent. Outside, the city passed by like a blurry movie, and I allowed myself to imagine what my life would be like without having to walk on eggshells in my own house, without having to endure looks of contempt at breakfast, without having to listen to poisonous comments about my age, my clothes, my habits. The taxi stopped in front of a small but well-kept house with a garden full of red flowers and a white-painted iron gate. Before I could ring the bell, the door opened, and Lydia appeared grayer than the last time I'd seen her, but with the same warm smile I remembered from our factory days. Margaret, dear. She hugged me as if 5 years hadn't passed since we last saw each other. Welcome to your new home. Those words, your new home, sounded like heavenly music. It had been so long since I'd felt welcome anywhere that I had forgotten what it felt like to be received with genuine love. Lydia helped me with the suitcase and led me inside. The house smelled of cinnamon and coffee scents that reminded me of my childhood when my mother baked cookies on Sundays, and the house was filled with laughter instead of tension. Sit down, I'll make some tea, Lydia said, pointing to a beige armchair that looked comfortable and inviting. And I want you to tell me everything from the beginning. We have all night and tomorrow too. For the first time in 5 years, I sat on a piece of furniture without worrying if it was allowed, without calculating if my presence would bother someone, without fearing I'd be told to move because someone else wanted to use that spot. I sank into the armchair and closed my eyes. The silence in Lydia's house was not the tense, hostile silence of Isaiah's house. It was a peaceful silence, full of possibilities, full of the promise that maybe, just maybe, the best days of my life were still to come. That first night at Lydia's house, I slept better than I had in the last 5 years. There were no stealthy footsteps in the hallway, no whispered conspiracies from the next room, no constant feeling of walking on eggshells. I woke up at 7 in the morning to the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the house like a morning hug. Lydia was already awake, sitting in her small yellow kitchen, reading the newspaper with glasses that kept slipping down her nose. When she saw me appear in the doorway, she smiled as if my presence were the best gift she had received in a long time. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty. How did you sleep?" "Like I haven't slept in years," I answered honestly, accepting the cup of coffee she handed me. The hot liquid went down my throat like a caress, and I realized it had been months since I had truly enjoyed a cup of coffee without rushing, without the pressure of having to get up immediately to prepare breakfast for people who didn't even say good morning. Lydia sat across from me with her own cup, and for a few minutes we drank in comfortable silence. Outside, birds sang in the garden she so lovingly maintained, and sunlight filtered through the curtains, creating golden patterns on the wooden table. "Margaret," she said finally, "I need to tell you something important, something that might change your perspective on your current situation." Her serious tone alerted me. I put my cup down and looked at her intently. "What is it, Lydia? Do you remember your sister Rachel?" The name hit me like a lightning bolt. Rachel, my younger sister with whom I had lost contact over 15 years ago after a family fight over our parents' inheritance. A silly argument that had grown huge because of our mutual pride and had ended with years of silence that neither of us had the courage to break. "Of course I remember her. Why do you ask?" Lydia took a deep breath as if she were about to announce something that would change everything. "Because she passed away 6 months ago, Margaret, and she left you something in her will." The world stopped. The cup trembled in my hands, and Lydia had to take it before I dropped it. Rachel was dead, and I didn't even know. My little sister with whom I had shared a room during our childhood, with whom I had laughed and fought and dreamed, had left this world without me being able to say goodbye, without us being able to fix things between us. How do you know?" I managed to ask through the tears that began to fall without permission. "Because I was the one who took care of her during her final months. We worked together at a sewing consultancy after we retired from the factory. She got cancer very fast, very aggressive. She looked for your number many times. She wanted to call you, but pride—" Lydia paused, her own eyes shining with unshed tears. "Pride can be a terrible prison, can't it?" I completely broke down. I cried for my dead sister, for the lost years, for the unsaid words, for all the opportunities for reconciliation we had let slip by. I cried until I felt my soul had been emptied of all the accumulated pain. Lydia hugged me, as only women who have lived a lot know how to hug, with that perfect mix of firmness and tenderness that can hold a person who is falling apart. "There's more," she whispered when my sobs subsided. "Rachel had a house. A beautiful 2-story house in the city center, which she bought with a lifetime of hard-earned savings. And she left it to you, Margaret, all of it completely paid off, no debts." The words floated in the air like soap bubbles I couldn't catch with my mind. A house. Rachel had left me a house after 15 years of not speaking. "There's money, too," Lydia continued, pulling a thick manila envelope from a kitchen drawer. $47,000 in a savings account. And a letter. A letter she wrote for you before she died. With trembling hands, I took the envelope. My name was written in Rachel's familiar handwriting, that round, careful script I had admired since I was a child. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, and a 3-page handwritten letter. "My dear sister Margaret," the letter began, and her voice seemed to whisper in my ear as I read. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here to tell you in person what I should have told you years ago. I'm sorry. I am deeply sorry that we wasted so much time fighting over things that now seem so small." My tears fell on the paper, smudging some of the words. But I kept reading. Rachel had known about my situation with Isaiah and Vanessa. She had asked about me, had discreetly investigated how I was living, and had felt pain knowing I was being mistreated in my own home. "I wanted to call you 1,000 times, the letter said, but my stupid pride stopped me. Now that I know I'm going to die, I realize that pride is worth nothing compared to a sister's love. I'm leaving you my house and my savings because I know you will need them to start over. Because I know you are strong and brave, even when you don't feel that way." The letter continued with memories of our childhood, with apologies for hurtful words said in moments of anger, with expressions of love that should have been said in life. It ended with a line that broke my heart. I hope you use this second chance to be truly happy. I love you, sister. I always loved you." Lydia watched me as I read her eyes full of an understanding that only comes from witnessing another's pain. When I finished, I carefully folded the letter and held it against my chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "The documents are all in order," Lydia said softly. "Rachel's lawyer took care of everything. The house is ready for you to move in whenever you want. It's yours, Margaret, completely yours." For the first time in 5 years, I felt rich. Not just because of the money or the property, but because of something deeper. The feeling of having options, of having power over my own life, of not depending on the poisoned charity of people who despised me. My phone, which had been silent all morning, began to vibrate insistently. It was Isaiah. Again. This time I decided to answer, but not with the broken, pleading voice of the desperate woman who had fled the day before. I answered with the firm voice of a woman who had just remembered her own worth. "Hello, Isaiah." "Mom, thank God you answered. Listen, I've been thinking all night. Vanessa and I talked and we're willing to make some changes. We can give you more space, more freedom. Just come home, please. Leo hasn't stopped asking for you." His voice sounded desperate, and something in his tone made me suspect there was more behind this conciliatory call. Maybe they had tried to manage the house without my help and realized how much work I did. Maybe Leo had thrown a tantrum, or maybe they had simply calculated that they needed my pension to make ends meet. "Isaiah," I said with a calm that surprised me, "I need to ask you something and I want you to answer honestly. How long had you been planning to send me to a nursing home?" The silence on the other end was so long, I thought the call had been disconnected. Finally, his voice came back small and guilty. "Mom, it wasn't something planned. We had just explored options. For the future. For when you were older and needed more care." "Options like what?" "Well, there are some very good places with activities for seniors with medical care." "How much do those places cost, Isaiah?" Another pause. "Between $1 or $200 and $1 $800 a month, depending on the level of care." I did some quick math. My pension was $450. Even if I sold my house, the money wouldn't have lasted more than 5 or 6 years in a decent place. After that, I would have been at the mercy of the public system in one of those horrible nursing homes that appear on the news for neglect and abuse. "I see," I replied, "and I suppose my house would have helped finance that stay." "Mom, don't think like that. We just wanted to make sure you had the best care possible. When I became too inconvenient to pretend you love me," I finished the sentence for him. I hung up the phone and placed it on the table. Lydia was watching me with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked. I smiled, and my smile felt genuine for the first time in years. "I feel perfectly fine. In fact, I feel powerful." 3 days later, I was standing in front of the house that was now mine, the keys trembling in my hand like leaves in the wind. It was a 2-story building with terracotta-colored brick walls and large windows that allowed natural light to flood every corner. The front yard was a bit neglected, but I could see the potential under the weeds. Rose bushes that needed pruning, a small stone path leading to the front door, and a lemon tree that promised sweet fruit in the coming seasons. Lydia was with me holding a box with the few personal belongings we had rescued from my suitcase. During these 3 days, she had been my rock, my guide through the legal procedures and the mountain of paperwork that had to be signed to make the property transfer official. "It's beautiful, Margaret," Lydia said as we looked at the facade. "Rachel had very good taste." I nodded, unable to speak. Emotion had a fist around my throat. This house represented more than a roof over my head. It represented independence, dignity, the possibility of living my final years like a queen in my own castle instead of a grateful beggar in someone else's house. I opened the front door, and the smell that greeted me was like a hug from the past. It smelled clean of well-cared-for wood, and underneath it all that soft lavender scent Rachel had worn since she was a teenager. It was as if my sister were there welcoming me home. The living room was spacious with hardwood floors that shone even in the dim light filtering through the closed curtains. The furniture was covered with white sheets like ghosts, waiting to be awakened. When I removed one of the sheets, it revealed a wine-colored velvet sofa that looked comfortable and inviting. "Look at this," Lydia whispered from the kitchen. "Margaret, come and see this." I followed her to the back of the house and gasped. The kitchen was twice the size of the one at Isaiah's, with light wood cabinets, a central island perfect for preparing elaborate meals, and a window overlooking a backyard with a garden that looked like something out of a fairy tale. But what really made me cry was what we found on the kitchen table: a bottle of wine with a note attached that said, "To celebrate your new life, with eternal love, Rachel." Even in death, my sister had thought of every detail to make me feel welcome in my new home. My phone rang as we were exploring the second floor. It was Isaiah. For the 5th time that morning. This time his tone had changed drastically. "Mom, we need to talk. Vanessa went to the bank to ask about the joint account, and they told her you had withdrawn your pension. What's going on?" I smiled as I ran my hand over the wooden banister of the staircase leading to the second floor. I had decided to move my pension to a completely new account at a different bank where only I had access. It was my money after all, even though for 5 years they had treated it as if it were a communal fund for household expenses. "What's going on, Isaiah, is that I'm finally taking control of my own life." "But Mom, we depend on that pension for the household expenses. Without it, we can't pay the bills, the food." "Oh, really?" I feigned surprise. But Vanessa told me I was a burden, a useless old woman who contributed nothing. If that's true, then my absence shouldn't affect your finances at all. Or am I wrong? The silence on the other end confirmed what I already knew. They had been living off my money while making me feel as if giving me a roof and food was an act of charity. "Mom, please be reasonable. Leo misses you a lot. He asks for you every day." Mentioning Leo was a direct stab to the heart. My grandson was the only part of that house I truly missed, the only one who had shown me genuine, unconditional love. "Leo asks for me. Or are you telling me that to emotionally manipulate me?" "It's not manipulation, Mom. It's the truth. Yesterday he asked me if you had died because you don't answer his calls." That information hurt me deeply. I hadn't answered Leo's calls because I knew that if I heard his little voice asking me to come back, my resolve would crumble like a sandcastle in the rain. "Isaiah, I want to see Leo, but not in that house. And not with you and Vanessa present. I want to spend time with my grandson without you two monitoring every word I say." "That's unreasonable, Mom. We're his parents." "And what am I, a dangerous stranger? For 5 years, I took care of that child while you went out to have fun. I cooked his meals, helped him with his homework, comforted him when he had nightmares. Now it turns out I can't spend time with him alone. It's not that. It's that you're afraid of what I might tell him, right? You're afraid Leo will find out how you've treated me, the things Vanessa has said to me, how you humiliated me in my own house." I hung up before he could answer. Lydia, who had been pretending not to listen while examining a beautiful wooden desk in what seemed to have been Rachel's study, came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You're doing great." "I'm furious," I admitted, "but I'm also determined. Isaiah and Vanessa are going to learn that they can't treat me like trash and then expect me to come running back when they need me." That afternoon, as we were organizing my things in my new bedroom, a large suite with a private bathroom and a balcony overlooking the garden, I received an unexpected call. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Margaret, this is Anthony Ruiz from the law firm Ruiz & Associates. I was your sister Rachel's lawyer." "Oh, yes, of course. How can I help you?" "Ma'am, there's something else you need to know about your sister's inheritance, something I preferred to handle after you were settled in the house." My heart sped up. Was there a legal problem, a hidden debt that could take away everything I had just gained? What kind of something? Your sister had a life insurance policy that was not included in the initial will because it required additional paperwork, a policy for the amount of $80,000. "Mrs. Margaret, you are the sole beneficiary." I had to sit down on the bed because my legs turned to jelly. $80,000. Added to the $47,000 I already had, that made me a woman with over $120,000 in the bank. It was more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. Are Are you sure? Completely sure. I just need you to come to the office tomorrow to sign some documents, and the money will be transferred to your account within 24 hours. After hanging up, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing this new reality. Not only did I have a beautiful house and enough money to live comfortably, but I had the financial freedom to make decisions that were previously impossible. Lydia came in with a cup of tea and sat next to me on the bed. From the look on your face, I'd say you've received good news. I told her about the insurance policy, and her eyes widened like saucers. Margaret, do you realize what this means? It means you can live however you want, wherever you want, for the rest of your life. It means you'll never have to put up with mistreatment out of financial dependence again. She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely independent. I didn't need alimony from a husband who had abandoned me. I didn't need the poisoned charity of a son who despised me. I didn't need anyone's permission for anything. That night, as I lay in my own bed in my own house with my own rules, I thought about Vanessa and her spit. I thought about Isaiah and his complicit silence. I thought about all the moments I had felt small, invisible, useless. But most of all, I thought about what I was going to do next. Because a woman with a paid-off house and over $100,000 in the bank has options that a desperate dependent woman never has. And I had plans for those options. A week after moving into my new house, I decided it was time to confront Isaiah and Vanessa on my own terms. During those 7 days, I had ignored their desperate calls, their text messages that swung between pleading and threats, and I had used that time to carefully plan my next move. On Friday morning, I dressed with special care. I chose a coral-colored suit I had bought the day before at a downtown boutique, black leather shoes that made me feel powerful when I walked, and the gold earrings I had inherited from my mother. I put on light makeup, styled my hair in an elegant bun, and looked at myself in the mirror until I saw the reflection of the woman I had always been inside. Dignified, strong, deserving of respect. I called a taxi and gave the address I knew by heart, but which now felt like foreign territory. During the ride, I mentally rehearsed what I was going to say, how I would handle their reactions, what cards I would play, and at what exact moment. The taxi stopped in front of my old house, and for a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with pain. It had only been 8 days since I had left dragging a suitcase, but it felt like an eternity. The house looked exactly the same, but I was a completely different person. I rang the doorbell firmly. I heard hurried footsteps on the other side, and when the door opened, the look of surprise on Vanessa's face was so comical it almost made me laugh. Her eyes scanned my outfit from top to bottom, clearly shocked by my transformation. "Margaret," she stammered. What a surprise. You look different." "Hello, Vanessa. I've come to talk to you and Isaiah. Is he home?" She nodded, still processing my new appearance. "Yes, he's here, in the living room." "Come in." I entered the house that had been my home for 5 years and immediately noticed the changes. The living room was messy. There were dirty dishes on the coffee table, and it smelled faintly of burnt food. Clearly my absence had made a bigger impact than they had anticipated. Isaiah appeared from the kitchen with an expression of relief mixed with nervousness. "Mom, thank God you came. We've been so worried about you. Where have you been staying?" "I've been staying at my house," I replied calmly, taking a seat on the armchair I previously wouldn't have dared to use without permission. "Your house?" Vanessa frowned. "What house did you rent something with what money?" I smiled, savoring the moment. "With the money my sister Rachel left me when she died 6 months ago, along with a beautiful house in the city center and a rather generous bank account." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Isaiah sank onto the sofa as if someone had sucked all the air out of his lungs. Vanessa stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, processing the implications of what she had just heard. "Your sister died." Isaiah finally found his voice. "Why didn't we know?" "Because for 15 years we had no contact over a stupid fight about our parents' inheritance, a fight that now seems ridiculous compared to the way you two have treated me." My voice remained firm, without a trace of the vulnerability I had shown for years. "How much money? Vanessa went straight to the point, as was typical of her. Enough to never again need anyone's poisoned charity, I replied. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life without having to put up with someone spitting in my food. Vanessa's face turned beet red. It was a moment of stress. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? I interrupted. Didn't mean to humiliate me in front of my grandson. Didn't mean to make me feel like a beggar in my own home. Didn't mean to call me a useless old woman who would soon be in a nursing home. Isaiah leaned forward, his hands clasped as if in prayer. Mom, we can talk about this. We can fix things. Vanessa will apologize. Right, honey. Vanessa looked at him as if he had asked her to jump off a building, but finally mumbled something that could have passed for an apology if you squinted and used a lot of imagination. I didn't come here for apologies, I said clearly. I came to inform you of some changes that are going to happen. I took a folder from my purse that I had carefully prepared with the help of my lawyer, Anthony Ruiz. First, this house, as you know, is in my name, fully paid for by my 20 years of work at the factory. Mom, we know it's your house, but we've lived here, we've made improvements. What improvements, Isaiah? I looked him straight in the eye. The hole in the bathroom wall you've been promising to fix for 2 years, the leaky shower, the loose floorboards that have almost made me fall 3 times. He blushed clearly, remembering all the times he had promised to make repairs and never had. The point is, I continued, I'm going to sell this house. I've already contacted a real estate agent, and he's coming to do an appraisal next week. Vanessa jumped up from the sofa as if she'd been pricked with a pin. You can't sell the house from under us. We live here. Leo goes to school nearby. I can and I will sell my house, I replied with a surprising calm. You have 30 days to find another place to live. That's what the law states when the owner decides to sell a property occupied by relatives. Isaiah looked like he was about to be sick. Mom, you can't do this. We're your family. My family. I rose from the armchair, feeling every inch of my height. My family wouldn't have spit in my food. My family wouldn't have treated me like a maid. My family wouldn't have planned to send me to a nursing home to take my things. We never planned that, Vanessa protested, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. I took out my phone and played a recording I had made during one of Isaiah's calls. His own voice filled the room. There are some very good places with activities for seniors between $1 and $200 and $1 $800 a month. Their faces turned white as paper. They hadn't expected me to have evidence of their plans. Second point. I continued consulting my notes. Leo, I want to establish a formal visitation schedule. Alternate weekends he comes to stay with me at my house, without your supervision. No way, Vanessa shouted. You're not going to fill my son's head with poison against us. Poison, I laughed coldly. Like the poison you injected into him when you forced him to watch you spit in my food, that kind of poison. Mom, Isaiah tried to mediate. Maybe we can reach an agreement. Maybe. There is no maybe. I cut him off. These are my terms. They are non-negotiable. You have 30 days to vacate my house, and we will establish visitation with Leo through my lawyer if necessary. Your lawyer? Vanessa practically spat the words. Now you have a lawyer. I have a lot of things I didn't have a week ago, I replied, putting the papers back in my purse, including self-respect. I walked towards the door, feeling their stares on my back like daggers. Before leaving, I turned around one last time. Oh, and one more thing. Leo deserves to know the truth about what happened here. He deserves to understand that a real family doesn't treat their loved ones like this. When he's ready, when he's older, I will tell him the whole story. Not to turn him against you, but to teach him how not to treat the people he loves. I left that house with my head held high and my heart pounding from a mixture of triumph and sadness. Triumph because I had finally reclaimed my power. Sadness because I had to go this far for my own son to respect me. The taxi was waiting for me outside, and as we drove away, I didn't look back. There was nothing in that house worth remembering with nostalgia. Everything good in my life was now ahead of me waiting in my new home. 2 weeks after my confrontation with Isaiah and Vanessa, my new life had settled into a rhythm I hadn't experienced in decades. I woke up when my body felt rested, not when Leo's crying or Vanessa's complaints jolted me from sleep. I had breakfast on my back terrace, surrounded by the garden I was slowly restoring, watching the flowers Rachel had planted come back to life under my care. But the most beautiful thing of all was the silence. Not the tense silence of walking on eggshells, but the peaceful silence of a woman who was finally at peace with herself. That Tuesday morning, as I was watering the roses that had started to bloom again, I heard a knock at my door. Through the window, I saw a small, familiar figure that made my heart race. Leo. I ran to the door, and when I opened it, my grandson threw himself into my arms with the desperate force of a child who has missed someone deeply. Behind him at a safe distance was Isaiah, with an expression that mixed shame and defeat. "Grandma Margaret." Leo buried his face in my neck, and I could feel his wet tears against my skin. "I missed you so much. I thought you had died because you didn't answer my calls." My heart broke and mended itself at the same time. I hugged my grandson as if he were the most precious thing in the world, because he truly was. "Oh, my love, I didn't die. I was just rearranging my life. But never listen to me. I could never die without saying goodbye to you first." Leo pulled back to look at me, his big eyes still shiny with tears. "Dad says you live in a new house now. Is that true?" "Yes, my love. Would you like to see it? It's very pretty, and it has a garden where we could plant whatever you want." His eyes lit up as if I had mentioned Disneyland. "Really? Could I plant tomatoes? I love tomatoes." I laughed a genuine laugh that hadn't escaped me in years. "We could plant all the tomatoes you want. And flowers too, and maybe a small herb garden for cooking." Isaiah approached timidly, clearly uncomfortable, but determined to speak. "Mom, could we talk for a moment alone?" I looked at Leo and stroked his hair. "My love, why don't you explore the backyard while I talk to Dad? But be careful with the roses. Some still have thorns." Leo nodded excitedly and ran to the backyard as if he had found a personal amusement park. Isaiah and I stayed in the living room, the air between us thick with unsaid words and wounds that were still bleeding. "Mom," he began, and his voice sounded like that of a small child who knows he has done something terrible. "I've come to ask for your forgiveness. For real. Not for convenience, not because I need something from you, but because I've realized how horrible we've been to you." I sat on my new sofa, the one I had chosen myself, without having to ask anyone's permission, and studied him carefully. There was something different about him, something I hadn't seen in years, genuine humility. "Go on," I said simply. "When you left at first, we were angry. Vanessa said you were being dramatic, that you would be back in a few days asking for forgiveness. But after a week," he ran his hands through his hair, that nervous gesture from his childhood. "Mom, we didn't know how much you did in that house. We didn't know how much we needed you." "What happened after I left?" I asked, although I had a pretty clear idea. "Everything fell apart," he admitted in a broken voice. "The house became a disaster. Vanessa and I couldn't stop fighting because neither of us knew how to handle everything you did. Leo asked for you constantly, and every time he mentioned your name, Vanessa would get hysterical." He paused, taking a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what came next. "And then there's the money. Mom, without your pension, we can't pay the basic bills. We tried to get full-time jobs, but with Leo and everything—" His voice trailed off. "And Vanessa, did she also realize her mistakes?" Isaiah looked down. Vanessa left." The words fell between us like stones in still water. "She left." "What do you mean, she left?" "She took Leo 3 days ago and went to her mother's house. She says she can't live in a house that's going to be sold, that she can't live with the uncertainty of not knowing if we'll have money to eat next month." His voice broke completely. "She says if I want to get my family back, I have to choose between her and you." For a moment, I felt a fierce satisfaction. Vanessa had shown her true colors. When things got tough, when she could no longer live comfortably at my expense, she had fled like the rat she had always been. But then I saw the pain in my son's eyes, and I remembered that despite everything that had happened, he was still the baby I had held in my arms, the boy I had raised alone when his father abandoned us. "And what are you going to do?" I asked him gently. "I don't know," he whispered. "Mom, I've been a terrible son. I allowed my wife to mistreat you in your own house. I plan to send you to a nursing home to please her. I've chosen her comfort over your dignity time and time again." Tears began to run down his cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. Not for me, but for Leo. He loves you, Mom. He talks about you all the time." I approached him, and after so many years I saw again the scared little boy who used to hide behind my skirts during storms. I put a hand on his shoulder, feeling him crumble under my touch. "Isaiah," I said softly, "I forgive you." But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean going back to how things were. He looked up, hope and fear dancing in his eyes. "What does it mean then?" "It means we start over, but with clear rules. It means that if you want a relationship with me, it will be based on mutual respect, not financial convenience. It means Leo can spend time with me whenever he wants without interference from you or Vanessa. And the house is being sold. That decision doesn't change." "But—" I paused, an idea forming in my mind. "There's something we could do, something that could benefit all of us." His eyes lit up with curiosity and hope. "This house has 4 bedrooms. It's too big for me alone. If you've really changed, if you're really willing to treat me with the respect I deserve, you could move in here. You and Leo, not Vanessa." "Really?" His voice was barely a whisper. "But with very clear conditions," I continued firmly. "You pay rent. Not much, but something to remind you that this is my house, not a favor I'm doing for you. You help with the chores. You respect my rules and my space, and if you ever disrespect me again or allow someone else to, you leave immediately." Isaiah nodded so vigorously I thought he would hurt his neck. "Yes, Mom. Yes to everything, I promise." Just then, Leo appeared at the patio door, dirt on his hands, and a smile that lit up his whole face. "Grandma, your garden is amazing. Can we really plant tomatoes together?" I looked at him. Then I looked at my son, who was crying tears of gratitude on my sofa, and I made a decision that would change everything again. "Yes, my love," I said to Leo. "We're going to plant a lot of tomatoes, and maybe if Dad is very well behaved, he can stay and help us." 6 months after that cursed Sunday, when Vanessa spat on my plate, I was sitting on my terrace watching Leo carefully water the tomatoes we had planted together. His small hands held the watering can with the seriousness of a surgeon focused on giving each plant exactly the amount of water it needed. "Grandma Margaret," he said without looking up from his work, "do you think the tomatoes will be ready for my birthday?" I smiled, mentally calculating. His birthday was in 3 weeks, and the tomatoes were already showing small green fruits that promised an abundant harvest. "I think so, my love, and when they're ready, we'll make the most delicious tomato sauce in the world." Leo jumped with excitement, staining his shirt with wet dirt. In these 6 months, he had grown so much that sometimes I had trouble recognizing the shy, scared boy who had witnessed that humiliation. He was now more confident, happier, freer to just be a child. Isaiah appeared at the kitchen door, drying his hands on a cloth. In these months he had changed as much as Leo, but in different ways. He had lost some weight from the physical labor he now did as a supervisor at a construction company, a job he had gotten after realizing he needed to support himself and his son without depending on anyone else. "How are my farmers doing?" he asked, approaching us with a genuine smile I hadn't seen on his face in years. "Dad, look how big the tomatoes are." Leo ran to him, taking his hand to drag him towards the plants. "Grandma says they'll be red for my birthday." Isaiah knelt to examine the plants with the seriousness Leo's most important project deserved. "Wow, they look amazing. They're going to be the tastiest tomatoes in the whole city." I watched this interaction between father and son with a mix of joy and melancholy. Joy because Leo finally had his father's full attention and unconditional love. Melancholy because I wondered how things would have been if Isaiah had been like this from the beginning, before Vanessa turned him into a lesser version of himself. Vanessa had tried to come back twice in these 6 months. The first time she arrived with tears and apologies, promising she had changed, that she understood her mistakes. Isaiah listened to her politely, and then told her he had made his decision. His son and his mother were more important than his marriage. Vanessa left in a fury, screaming threats about taking Leo and never letting us see him again. The second time she came with a lawyer trying to claim rights to the house where she had lived for 5 years. The meeting lasted exactly 10 minutes, the time it took for my lawyer Anthony Ruiz to explain that she had no legal right to a property that had never been in her name and for which she had never paid a cent. Since then, she had been silent, although we knew from mutual friends that she had moved in with her mother for good and was telling everyone that we had unjustly thrown her out onto the street. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Lydia calling, as she did every Tuesday, for our ritual of catching up on neighborhood news and planning our activities for the week. "How's my favorite entrepreneur?" she asked, with the warmth that had made our friendship blossom even more in these months. I laughed. Entrepreneur was the joke she had started 3 months ago when I decided to use some of Rachel's money for something I had been passionate about my whole life: sewing. I had bought 3 professional sewing machines and had turned one of the rooms in the house into a small workshop where I did alterations for the women in the neighborhood. What had started as a hobby to keep me busy had turned into a thriving little business. The ladies came not only because I did good work, but because my house had become a refuge where women could talk freely about their problems while I fixed their dresses and their lives with the same patience. "I have a new client for you," Lydia continued. "Her name is Vanessa. Can you believe it? A young woman going through a situation very similar to yours. Her mother-in-law treats her horribly. She lives in her husband's family home and feels like a stranger in her own life." The name made me laugh ironically. "What a coincidence with the name. Sure, tell her to come tomorrow afternoon. Leo will be at school and Isaiah at work, so we can talk freely." After hanging up, I thought about how life takes such strange turns. 6 months ago, I was the desperate woman who needed help, and now I was the woman helping others in similar situations. It wasn't just the money that had changed my life, but the recovery of my own dignity and the understanding that I deserved respect. That afternoon, as I prepared dinner in my kitchen where I could cook whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without having to ask for permission or endure derogatory comments, I reflected on everything that had happened. Vanessa's spit on my plate had been the most humiliating moment of my life, but it had also been my liberation. Because sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to realize we deserve much more than what we're getting. Leo ran in from the garden, his cheeks rosy from exercise, and a smile that could light up an entire city. "Grandma, you know what I told my teacher about our tomatoes, and she said that when they're ready, I can bring some to share with the class." "I think that's a wonderful idea," I replied, hugging him and feeling his pure, unconditional love fill all the empty spaces that years of mistreatment had left in my heart. Isaiah appeared at the kitchen door, his work uniform dirty, but with an expression of satisfaction I had learned to recognize. It was the face of a man who had honestly earned his day's work, who could look his son in the eye, knowing he had done the right thing. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked. And the question was genuine, not an empty formality as it had been for years. "It was perfect," I replied. "And it was true. Yours." "Perfect, too. The supervisor congratulated me on the work on the new school project. He says he's going to recommend me for a promotion." I saw the pride in his eyes, the pride of a man who had learned to value himself for his own merits instead of living at the expense of others. He was the son I had always hoped he would be the father Leo deserved to have. That night, after Leo had fallen asleep and Isaiah had retired to his room to study for his upcoming promotion exam, I sat on my terrace with a cup of tea and looked at the stars. I thought of Rachel, of how her final act of love had been to give me the freedom I needed to discover who I really was when no one was humiliating me. I thought of all the women who came to my sewing workshop seeking not only to have their clothes fixed, but to have help sewing the broken pieces of their self-esteem back together. I thought of Vanessa wondering if she would ever realize that the power she had wielded over me was false, built on my own insecurity and my fear of being alone. I wondered if she would ever understand that true respect cannot be demanded, it can only be earned. But most of all, I thought of myself, of the 67-year-old woman who had discovered that it's never too late to start over, to reclaim your dignity, to build the life you deserve to have. Vanessa's spit had been her downfall, not mine, because it had awakened me from a dream of resignation and reminded me that I am Margaret, a strong, hard-working woman worthy of love and respect, a woman who doesn't need anyone's approval to know her own value. And that woman finally was home.